Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about mentorship. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, "Hi Frederick, thank you so much for answering so many valuable questions. I have learned a lot from you." Well, thank you. That makes me very happy to hear. Can you please answer one question for me? How should you go about mentoring a developer on your team? This is an excellent question, and I will give you my favorite tips on how to mentor things. I'll pat myself a little bit on the back here and say that these are methods that I've used on multiple occasions, and they've worked really well. I've actually gotten a few commendations on my approach, so I hope that they will be useful to you as well, because I really do. Well, I feel that they work, and I've seen them work. So the first thing to do is to figure out what level of person are you getting into the company and what type of person are you getting into the company. So the level is important because you don't want to you don't want to misalign the stuff that you do towards the person you're dealing with. An example would be if you have a very junior profile, well, then it's probably not a good idea to put them on the most die-hard central core stuff immediately. And if you have a fairly senior developer, it's probably not a good idea to give them like an enormous amount of like up close, like I'm sitting next to you all the time type of thing, because they kind of know some stuff and they probably want to just figure some stuff out on their own. So you have to tune into the person. The emotional intelligence is like everything here in order to figure this out. So the first thing I always do is to establish rapport with the person that I'm going to mentor. That is number one, and that requires FaceTime. So the first thing we do is literally, you should. This is like the prep work now. Like this is the thing that you should do before the person even starts, is to create a story roadmap of stories. And usually the way that I think about story roadmaps is in progressions. Think of it as leveling the person up in a game or something like that. So start at level 1. Create like some story that is something useful, that is super trivial in many cases to do. The reason why you want those simple trivial things is because you have a work process at your company. You have all these things that you might know about or you don't even think about that you know about, and you might have access to systems and so forth, and maybe you didn't even think about making sure that there is like an onboarding process or something like that, or you forgot about something. So this person won't really have they will have a journey of discovery, if that makes sense. They will discover how to release something in your company, and it doesn't matter if the first story is like super tiny or if it's super big. The important part is that they get through the flow and release something to production as quickly as possible, because that way you can know that they have at least the basics for delivering something, so now they can work. And then you start, usually, my philosophy is to start at the outskirts of the project. In other words, the first few stories should be fairly simple things that are like nice to have, something that you yourself could do in a day or an afternoon or something like that, but will probably take them a little bit longer, and that's fine because it's about learning in the beginning. And then you increase, you think of it as an onion. They start at the absolute outer layer, and the better they get, the closer to the core of the onion and like all the most critical business logic they get. It's almost like they earn the ability or like the trust to work on more and more critical parts of the system, and by the time they reach the center they don't even need you anymore for like a lot of stuff. They might have questions and so forth, but they're probably fairly autonomous at that point. So to do that, first and foremost, create this story roadmap, and then make sure that you talk to your manager and agree on that you're supposed to be this person's mentor, so that they have an understanding of that your productivity now is going to be affected. The person's onboarding process has to take presidency and so forth, because it's really important that you are there for this person in the beginning and that you feel that you can be there. But that's going to be really hard if you have your manager breathing down your neck because you're on either your manager is a douchebag or you work on something that is like enormously critical, like sharp deadlines all the time, so forth and so forth, then you shouldn't be this person's mentor, because you will not be able to support them properly. So do that first. Once that's done, they start their first day. Is all about building rapport. And I like to do pair programming the first week at the very least with this person. And once again, it really depends on the person. Now, if you have someone who is very anxious, very socially awkward, well, not necessarily awkward, but a junior developer who feels that like everything is new to them, hold them by the hand. And what I usually do is that we do pair programming, and I program through the person, because it's really important to get to scrub away any procrastination or fear of failure from the person as quickly as possible. You want their fingers on the keyboard as much as possible. They should be doing everything, because doing things, just the motions, even if I tell them literally every single thing, builds comfort with doing things, because you don't want them to just to say to them like, oh, do this and that and that and that, and then have them be scared shitless of just doing things on the keyboard because they might break something. If you're there and you're guiding them, you are the one who's taking quote-unquote responsibility for what's coming, about what's happening. They don't feel like they're in the hot seat and that they might make a mistake. Do that in the beginning, because it really quickly builds comfort. If it's a more senior profile, you don't have to do that. It's fine to just gauge in, all right, how much FaceTime does this person actually want with you? And usually you do the same thing here. You just kind of think of it as a gauge. You tune in to the person, how present you are. But in an extreme case, you pair program with them pretty much like all of their stories at least the very first week. And then you do an introduction. It's really important to do an introduction of the entire system, and like you go through like all of the like the main systems, what's accesses they need, and how the system kind of works, and the core features. Not every single little detail, but how you do work, how do you write tests, how do you start your server, where are the different environments, what does the process look like, which people are they going to work with, and who do they ask for help if they have problems with this or that, and so forth. And then like ideally a chart, an overflow, an overview of like how the systems, like how they all fit together, because you usually work with a distributed system, right? That is the first thing. And then you, as I was saying, you move through with them this story roadmap, and then you kind of continue this process. And within, like, you kind of have to feel this one out. I usually find that it takes between a month to 6 months roughly. You want them to get to a point where they are a domain expert of something as quickly as possible. Well, it's not as quickly as possible, but by the time they feel like they can kind of work autonomously, and you start to feel it, the less they ask you for help, the more autonomous they are. And at some point you want them to be in charge of something. In other words, you want them to take on what I call like a project. There is this saying that if you get your name associated with something in a company, you own that for life. If you become like the expert of Webpack, or you become the expert of tests, or whatever setup you might have, then that's your responsibility, because everybody knows that, oh, there was Frederick, or it was Bob, or Jane, or whoever who knows the most about this thing. So I will just ask that person every single time, because they know the most. You want your junior to get to that point, because it builds a lot of confidence, and it builds commitment to the company. So find some new story, some new feature, something that is being built, and make them the person who is kind of in charge of delivering this project. You are still there supporting them, so they're not alone, but like they're the ones who's going to deliver this thing. And that means that whenever somebody has a question around this thing, they're going to come to the junior, and now they get organic FaceTime with more and more people. And it's fine if they don't know all the things and they ask for help and so forth. The important part is that they get that exposure to other people, and before you know it, they will actually be able to answer all the questions around the thing that they are a domain expert in. So what I want you to take away from this is that my onboarding process when I mentor developers is very much the first and most important thing. If there's only one thing you can establish, it is to do this thing, and that is trust. Everything comes down to that they trust that you're there for them, and that they feel as if they can ask you questions. Doesn't matter if it's a smart question or a dumb question, they feel comfortable talking to you. That is number one. No exclusions. It doesn't matter if it's a senior or if it's a junior. It's everything in order to make a successful onboarding process or mentor a software developer. And then you gauge in what type of developer you have. Create a story roadmap before they start, so that you can start with very simple stuff, so that they can get a feel for how the work works, how the pipeline looks, and then work them in towards. Really think about the onion thing. Start at the outer layers and work your way into the core. And before, say, 6 months or something like that, depending on the person now, try to get them to own something, to be a domain expert in something. It doesn't have to be like the main business thing or something like that. You just make sure that they become a go-to person for some area of the system, and all of a sudden you have yourself a very productive software developer. That's at least my experience. Have a great day.